the sort of chronological historical context of your life, you know, you're the guy that wrote in quiet desperation, who clearly, you know, you articulated that you hoped for and had some faith in getting married, but also were sort of open to the possibility of that not happening.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to a space of saying, I'm gonna date Danielle, and I think I really like her, and you know, how did you get into that place?
I think for me it was because I had started to shift when I wrote the book. I really didn't believe that I would get married. I believed at one point I had a really strong spiritual experience that whether or not I ever got married, as long as I, you know, just took things day at a time, stayed faithful, everything would work out, whether I got married on this side of the veil or the other. But the spirit of that was so strong that for the first time I felt okay with it. Because I think a lot of people when they struggle, it's like, I'm not okay with being alone.
Yeah.
And that's the big question. And I thought I'm okay with being alone because and in that teaching, like the spiritual feeling of it, like I knew that alone didn't mean lonely.
Mm-hmm.
You can be single without being lonely, and you can be married and still be very lonely.
Yeah.
And so I knew that this was a commitment to stay in the church, whether or not I ever got married. But for the first time, there was this real level of acceptance with whatever God called me to do, I could do it, and I was okay. And for a while, I felt like it was almost maybe giving me permission that I wouldn't get married.
Taking the pressure off of
It certainly released a lot of pressure. Yeah. And I was okay. And I think maybe the most important piece of that was that, you know, there's still a lot of cultural pressure. Right. But because I had this divine affirmation, divine approval of being, that if I didn't get married, I was, and stayed and it was as faithful as, and lived as faithfully as I possibly could, mm-hmm. I was approved of God.
Cool.
I was approved of God.
Mm-hmm.
And my offering was accepted. Mm-hmm. And that all of the blessings that are associated with the fullness of the gospel would happen. Mm-hmm. It was a matter of when, not if.
Right.
And so with that, I kind of felt like, okay, I'm off the hook. Mm-hmm. I don't have to worry about getting married. Mm-hmm. Like it was always, I know I'll get married, but it's the next life. Like mm-hmm. I just expected that would be it. And then at one point I felt rebuked that if I was to have faith, like true faith in Christ, it was not my decision to make that I wouldn't get married. It was my decision to make that I would follow Christ and that I would live worthy of the blessing whenever it came. Okay. And that my responsibility as a matter of faith was to prepare myself for spiritually and emotionally for the possibility that I may not get married in this life, right. And to prepare myself spiritually and emotionally for the possibility that I would, and then to surrender the rest, mm-hmm. Just give it to God. Yeah. And so with that I was okay, but I still felt like there was just an emotional shift in me where I still felt like, okay, I'm open to whatever end happens, mm-hmm. But I still didn't believe that I would. Mm-hmm. And then over time, I mean, this is a process of it. I mean, it was like maybe six years after the book came out that we got married. So over the process of time, it was a couple of years, I think, I started, and it was more like intuitive sense. I started to have this feeling like I think I probably will get married in this life, but probably later than sooner. Okay. And then maybe a year before.
Sorry, was that based on anything, or like you said, no, it was an intuition, but it was.
I think it was just kind of.
Just saying.
I think it was just kind of a slow. I mean, I'd grown a lot emotionally. Okay. I feel like I had matured a lot, so there was that piece of it too. But I think it was just this general kind of spiritual sense, and I don't know where. It was just a sense, and I don't know exactly where that came from, because it wasn't like I had a very tangible spiritual experience like I had in some other cases. It was more of just like this growing sense.
But I guess also was there any like sort of shift in terms of your experience of sexuality or attraction, or was there shifting going on there that also, in addition to the spiritual, just prompting or manifestation? That influenced that?
I'd been doing a lot of therapy, mm-hmm. And I think that I definitely felt a decrease in the pull of attraction toward men sexually, mm-hmm. But it wasn't necessarily, it was like this kind of shift, like all of a sudden I was becoming heterosexual or something. It was just, I feel okay, and it didn't like the need, it didn't feel like I need to be with someone or I need to be with a guy. It was just, or even this real longing to be with a guy. It was just, I'm attracted to men, but I don't but I felt emotionally healthy. I felt emotionally good, but I still didn't feel the strong desire to be with a woman. But I did. It was just this kind of growing sense that I think I will get married. It was, but later, rather than sooner. And then probably a year before I met Danielle, we met because we met way back when, but we didn't talk for a decade or more. And I just had this sense shifted to where I think I will get married, but it'll be sooner rather than later. So again, it was just kind of following this like spiritual intuition, I think. And then at one point I had I was reading an experience of a guy who is active member of the church, experiences same-sex attraction, but is active and faithful, and he had a very strong spiritual experience. Well, he told it to me once, and then I asked him to write it down, and then I was rereading it later. But he was talking about how he had a pretty remarkable vision after. We had two really remarkable. Well, he had a vision as part of a blessing that he was given, and then at one point he was praying to know. He's like, I still really want to get married, and then he had this really vivid dream where he met his wife in his dream. But he was praying the night before. He was like, I really would like to know when. I mean, I'm okay if I don't ever get married, but I would like to know if it's going to happen this life. And in the dream, that answer was never given, but it was like, but he met his wife in his dream. And he was just like, okay, whatever. Like, I still know that the Lord's aware of me, and I'm okay whenever that happens. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, I had never prayed, like, and asked, when will it happen?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's understandable.
And you may or may not ever get an answer, because I'd prayed that
Right.
way before and never got an answer.
You may not like the answer either.
Yeah. And I decided that I really wanted, I was going to pray. And even if I didn't get an answer, I thought that was a fair prayer.
Pray for what exactly?
To ask if, when, like, if I am going to get, like, help me to know. Is it sooner or later? Because I had the sense that it was going to be sooner or later. If it's sooner, when, where? What do I need to do? Like, what do you want from me? Like, what's my part in this now? Because I was really, really okay being single, and very happy single, but I still wanted to be married. I mean, I still believe that that's a part of the gospel plan. And I'm a firm believer that if people aren't happy single, they'll never be happy married.
Right.
And so
not only were you happy, content, I guess, single, and also sort of becoming very, very comfortable with your experience of same-sex attraction.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
You were pretty. You weren't in turmoil, I guess, over it.
Yeah.
Or
no, not at all.
Desperation.
No, not at all.
Obviously.
Well, and even when I wrote the book, I mean, that was like a more kind of a charged title. That wasn't even my choice of a title. But
Fair enough.
like the working title for that was My Peace I Give. Because for me, that was what it was all about. It was the Lord's peace. Yeah. It wasn't, which is different than the world's peace.
Right.
And so, and I wanted the Lord's peace, and it was the Lord's peace that He gave me. But Quiet Desperation is sexier, and that was a marketing decision. So, and so, I was okay with it. Yeah. So, but when, where was I before that?
Sorry, this process of spiritual intuition and then actually going, or contemplating, praying about the when and the how, because you're getting these promptings that it could be sooner.
And it was shortly after that prayer that Danielle and I, like, we were back and forthing a little bit on Facebook. Like, she had added me as a friend, and like, she was just really, like, she's very witty, especially in writing. I mean, she's very witty in person too, but at the time we weren't communicating in person. We were just like in writing. Like, she would write these things on my wall, and they were always so funny. And I thought, and I was living here actually. So she was in Utah. I was living in Texas, and I remember thinking, I want to give this a shot. Not to give it a shot. I'm going to ask her out on a date the next time I'm in Utah for an extended period.
Like some sort of decision about I'm going to date girls in general, or was it really just like,
no, it was just Danielle.
I'm working, and then wait, oh wow, okay.
Because it wasn't even this feeling of like, I feel like I'm really interested in women now, right? It was just this feeling of like, I'm happy being single, and I like being single, and if I meet someone that I like, but I committed to myself that I was done dating for the sake of dating. I was done.
Right.
And I thought, if I ever go out with somebody, if I ever date somebody, it's because I'm interested in them, not because I'm interested in dating for the sake of dating or marriage for the sake of marriage.
Just a little bit.
But I did still kind of want to be married, if I met someone that I loved as a person.
Yeah.
Whenever that happened again, we were kind of back and forthing via Facebook, and again I knew her because of her. I was friends with her brother years earlier, and she would write these funny things, and I just thought. And then she had this picture on there once that her sister-in-law is a professional photographer, like a natural life photographer, and she was like, I just thought, oh, she's gorgeous, like this really, really gorgeous photo. And so I thought, okay, the next time I'm in Utah for a significant period of time, I'm going to go on a date. I'm going to ask her out. And if I want to go on another date, I'm going to go on another date. And if I don't want to go on another date, I'm not going to go on another date. Like, I'm not pressuring myself. I'm just opening myself up to the possibility of this.
I have to stop you. Like, and I know this is maybe one of my weaknesses. Just that alone, getting into that headspace alone, brings about 1,000 questions. And so, but in terms of what's motivating your action or in your thoughts there? Because on the one hand, you're saying, well, I decided this and I did this. You know, like, wait, she's witty and she's really pretty in the photo, and so I'm going to ask her out on a date.
Yeah.
But still, I'd be like, but what about, you know what I mean? What about all this other stuff? So, what was going on in your head? And I'm clear, you know, we obviously don't think the same way. That's what I'm trying to understand how.
Well,
what's going on.
I think too, for our whole experience in dating, from whatever start to finish till we got married, I don't think we ever were really thinking, either of us, about like, you know, what are all the implications of this? It was really just kind of one step at a time where, okay, this feels good. Okay, yeah, you know, and so I think
that makes sense.
sometimes I answer for Ty, and he's like, "Did they ask you?" So,
Except for I wasn't thinking that.
It makes sense.
But I usually do get caught up in that, and or that was my tendency anyway. Because at BYU, you go on a date, and people are like, you know, they're scoping you as eternal partner before you even go on your first date, right? And I think, and I had done a lot of therapy, and it wasn't necessarily for the sake of like trying to change my attractions as much as it was understanding myself. I realized that I still had issues and baggage, and I had shame about some things, and like, and I wanted to work through a lot of that. And so, but I just had done a lot of therapeutic work through like Buddhist, Taoist perspectives, and there's just this real like being and accepting and just being present and being okay with the moment, being in the moment, being okay with the moment, non-judgment.
Do you want to try him over here?
Yeah. And it's turned out that that's actually more my professional focus too.
Hi, baby.
Is therapy from that perspective. Because I really believe that like there's a lot of doing in Mormonism and not enough being. And I think in truth really there's a balance of the two, but we definitely err, I think, on the side of doing rather than being, and really just kind of accepting ourselves where we're at, you know. But I had come to a place where I thought I don't need life to look like anything in particular for me to be happy. I just want to feel like I'm in the right place.
Yeah, that's a very healthy place to be.
And so when I came to this, like I really felt like if I was to approach marriage even just 5 years earlier, it would have been from a different place and probably a not very healthy place.
Right. Too much expectation.
A lot of expectation. A lot of it's supposed to look like this. This is the cultural expectation, or this is the cultural model, or whatever, or this is the right. This is whatever. And I don't believe. I was able to, through a lot of this, I was able just to release a lot of self-expectation, other expectation, cultural expectation, family expectation. Like what I was doing for me and in my relationship with God, because I felt it was right, not because it was doctrine, not because it was dogma, because it was family expectation, social culture or anything like that. And I knew, and I would often question myself, like when I'm doing something, what's my motive for this? Am I doing this because I feel left behind? Am I doing this because I'm lonely? Because I think if I'm lonely, that's not the right reason to get married. And so it happened at the right time because I was in a really good place emotionally. And, I just had this spiritual sense or this kind of intuitive sense that kept returning.
I just have to point out too, a hugely important component of where you were at that moment was also one of the things that I'm finding in the conversations with lots of people and, understanding what is it like to be homosexual and Mormon, there can be this component of working oneself into such a state of distrust of one's own instincts and also spiritual promptings, which is hard to tell the difference sometimes. There's such a distrust because there's that aspect of oneself that is, in a sense, rejected so heavily, that you definitely don't want to, trust or act on those instincts, and so you shut down all these other instincts. So I just have to point out, the fact that you were to the point where you could be comfortable and trust your instincts.
Yeah. And
It's big. It's huge.
And I felt like I'd grown enough spiritually at that point and emotionally that I understood a lot of, because I think a lot of people feel feelings and they don't know where they're coming from, which is kind of, I guess, maybe what you were just saying.
To a degree, and just not, you may feel like, oh, I should do this or do that, but I guess I'm also projecting. I mean, I know this has been my experience that, I was so disgusted and so disturbed by my own feelings of same-sex attraction, but also trying to work on self-awareness, but finding that it's coming from the same sort of primordial and deeply spiritual place, frankly, within me, as the same place where I thought I've been feeling the Spirit and the light of Christ, or some of those basic instincts of both attraction and also spirituality was coming from the same place, which caused me to go, oh, geez, I don't even know what I trust within myself.
Yeah. Well, and you made a comment in your interview with John Dehlin where there's this element in the cultural conversation that acceptance means I'm adopting a gay identity and I'm pursuing a homosexual relationship. Right. And for me, and way back when, when I had that spiritual experience, there was a real level of I am okay, and God loves me and accepts me where I'm at, and feeling that for the first time, and there was just this kind of overpowering feeling of love, right? And I don't think, and you made the comment that acceptance doesn't necessarily mean that I'm choosing this or that. It's just I'm me.
Yeah, being present with myself.
I'm no cultural, socio-culturally constructed identities. No, I have to do this or do no expectations. There's all these things. I am just me where I'm at, and I am loved. I'm valued. I have value. I don't need to change to have value, because people talk about change, and it's well, if worth, I have to change in order to get this or that, or if change never happens. It's tomorrow never comes. It's that kind of thing. If worth is always on the other side of change, it's always a step away. Right. And so really being with and accepting myself where I was.